Why ancient humans never ignored bird calls. A single bird went silent in the trees above. Then another stopped calling just a moment later. Then the entire forest became completely quiet at once. An ancient hunter froze instantly without making a sound. Every muscle in their body stopped moving completely. Their eyes moved slowly across the tree line ahead. Something had entered the area without being seen yet. Something large enough to silence every bird around them. And whatever it was very close. Ancient humans lived in a world of constant sound. The forest was never truly silent under normal conditions. Birds called from every direction throughout the entire day. Different species, different heights, different patterns, different times. This wasn't background noise that could be safely ignored. This was information arriving from every direction at once. The bird calls were telling a complete and detailed story, and ancient humans had learned to read every single word. The silence was always the most important signal of all. When birds stopped calling, something had changed in the area. A predator had moved into the bird's line of sight, or a large unknown shape had appeared among the trees. Birds reacted to threats before humans could ever detect them. Their eyes were sharper and positioned higher above the ground. Their hearing could detect movement that human ears completely missed, and their response to danger was immediate and completely reliable. An ancient human who heard that sudden silence understood instantly. Stop, listen, do not move until the situation becomes clear. But silence was only the beginning of what birds communicated. Different alarm calls meant completely different types of incoming danger. A sharp, repeated call from high branches meant aerial threat. Eagles and hawks circling overhead produced a very specific sound. Ancient hunters who heard that call looked immediately upward first. A lower, more frantic call from ground-level birds meant something else. A ground predator was moving through the undergrowth very nearby. A snake produced a completely different reaction from smaller birds around it. Ancient humans spent years learning these distinctions with extraordinary precision. Not from a teacher sitting in a formal teaching setting. From watching. From listening. From following experienced hunters through the forest. A child walking behind an adult tracker learned by watching reactions. The adult would stop. The child would watch where they looked. Over years, patterns became clear and then became instinctive knowledge. That specific call from that specific bird meant look right now. That particular change in tone meant the threat was moving away. There were birds that ancient humans followed deliberately and intentionally. Not because they were beautiful or interesting to observe. Because they led directly to things that the group needed. Certain birds followed large predators at a safe distance above. Not from bravery, but because predators left scraps worth eating afterward. An ancient human following the same birds found the same scraps, or found the predator's location before accidentally walking into its path. Specific birds were known to nest near reliable water sources. Certain species only lived where specific food plants grew nearby. Others appeared only when a particular season was about to change. An ancient group moving through unfamiliar territory read these birds carefully. The birds knew the landscape far better than any passing human. They had lived in that specific area their entire lives. Following the right bird for the right reason saved enormous time. And time, in the ancient world, was survival itself. The sounds birds made before storms were completely unmistakable to them. Certain species flew lower than normal when pressure began to change. Others called with unusual frequency just before heavy rain would arrive. An experienced ancient human could read these signals hours in advance. That meant shelter could be prepared before the storm actually hit. Fire materials could be protected before the rain made them useless. The difference between catching the warning and missing it was everything. Birds also revealed the presence of other human groups nearby. A large group of humans moving through forests disturbed birds consistently. The disturbance traveled ahead of the group like an invisible wave. Ancient hunters who understood this could detect approaching groups far away. Whether that meant hiding, preparing, or simply changing direction depended on context. But the early warning gave them time to make a choice that would not have existed without listening to birds. Water birds were among the most valuable signals in dry seasons. Certain species only appeared near water that was permanent and reliable. Others congregated near water that appeared briefly and then disappeared again. An ancient group tracking water across unfamiliar dry terrain used birds, not as a last resort, as the primary navigation method used. The direction a specific bird flew at dawn told experienced trackers exactly where water could be found within a reasonable traveling distance. Night birds carried completely different information than daytime birds carried. The calls that began after dark told a different kind of story. Owls called from areas where small prey animals were actively moving. That information told hunters exactly where to focus attention the next morning. An ancient person on watch duty listened to night birds constantly, not casually, with the focused attention that the situation always demanded, because a change in the night calls was always worth investigating. Ancient trackers also used birds to locate specific animals being hunted. Birds that followed large herbivore herds for insects disturbed by movement appeared above the herd like a moving cloud visible from distance. A hunter who spotted that cloud knew exactly what moved below and knew the direction the herd was traveling without seeing them. This information allowed the group to plan an approach from ahead, to position themselves at a point where the terrain worked in their favor, rather than chasing blindly through dense ground and exhausting themselves completely. The relationship between birds and ancient humans was completely two-directional. Birds benefited from human presence in specific and measurable ways. When humans hunted and butchered prey, birds came for scraps immediately. When humans cleared areas of vegetation, insects became exposed and available. Birds learned to follow specific human groups the same way they followed predators. This created a bond that neither side fully understood consciously, but both sides relied on completely and without question. Ancient humans also used bird behavior to identify dangerous plants and water. If birds avoided a particular fruit that appeared edible by sight, that was information worth taking seriously before consuming anything at all. Birds that drank freely from a water source made it safer. Birds that avoided a pool entirely despite apparent thirst indicated something wrong. This wasn't a perfect system and it didn't claim to be, but it was better than learning dangerous things through direct personal experience. The knowledge of bird calls was passed down with extraordinary care. An elder who had spent 50 years listening to the forest had built a library of sound that existed nowhere except inside them. This person could identify dozens of species by call alone instantly, could identify the specific emotional state of each call with precision, alarm versus territorial, mating versus feeding, distress versus simple communication. Each distinction carried information that affected decisions the entire group made daily. Losing that person meant losing irreplaceable knowledge with no backup copy anywhere. Children were trained to listen from the earliest age possible, not sit-down formal training, with explanations and structured lessons given daily. Walk with the adults. Be quiet. Listen to what they hear. Watch what makes the experienced hunters stop and change direction suddenly. Watch what makes them relax after a moment of alert attention. Over years, the patterns became instinctive in a way that lasted forever. A lifetime of listening built a knowledge that never needed to be recalled consciously. It simply activated when the right sound arrived in the right context. There were moments when the birds got it wrong and humans paid. A predator that moved with unusual stealth and silence could slip past them. Certain large snakes moved so slowly that birds didn't react at all. Certain terrain was so loud with normal bird activity that signals were lost. Ancient humans understood these limitations completely and planned around them accordingly. They never relied on birds alone when the stakes were at their highest. They combined bird signals with ground signs, wind direction, and visual scanning, because no single source of information was ever completely reliable on its own. And yet, when an ancient hunter heard a sudden silence fall across the trees, they stopped immediately, every time, without hesitation, without questioning whether it mattered this specific time, because the times it mattered were the times that defined everything. The silence that preceded a predator was indistinguishable from any other silence, until it was too late to respond to it appropriately. The ancient humans who survived treated every silence as real, because the cost of treating a real silence as nothing was not a cost they were willing to pay.